Alright guys, another day, another video. So in today's video, we're going to continue fleshing out and integrating with our Vapor server backend. So in this video, we're going to work on the comment screen. And right now what you're looking at is coming off of the Vapor server and the Postgres database that I'm running. So we're going to be integrating the comment screen SwiftUI with the Vapor server. So let's get started. All right, guys. So as you recall, we have this API service, and then we have a bunch of sub APIs basically. So in this case, because the comment screen is dealing with comments, we're going to be refactoring this code right here. We're going to get rid of all of these hard codings and update this guy so that it goes to the Vapor server. Now, in order to do that, we actually do need to make a couple of refactorings to the model, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to start with the refactors of the API service first, because I want you guys to see the error types that come in when you're converting from JSON to a static type or vice versa. And I think it'll make more sense, and it'll be clearer as to some of the problems that might arise if you actually see the issues as they occur. So this is the Vapor server model for comment. And as you can see here, instead of having a parent comment ID, we have the actual object, because this is the way the Fluent ORM works in terms of relationships to other tables in the database. So, and then here on the client side, the model's obviously significantly different. So I'm going to leave this alone for now, like I said, and we'll just start with the API service. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this and all the other hard codings that we have here. And then we're going to make this inherit from the base API. And since this is boilerplate code, I'm just going to copy and paste those fields and the init that we had last time. So we'll just do that. And let me double check my notes so that I don't forget anything. All right. So just like last time, we take the strings for the root, or the string for the root that we had created. So in the case of comments, the sub URL is just comments. And then let's see here. Okay. So we're going to use URL session again. And it's not uploading anything, so we're just going to use this, the data task. So this one is more easier, I guess you could say. So we'll check for null on the data that's coming back, and then we'll return if there's no data. So we're going to do the decode. So I'm doing the catch statements. So in order to run the decode, we're going to grab the decoder, call decode. We're getting an array of comments off of data. So this will be our comments off of the call decoded from JSON. And then, like I just said before, this decode attempt will trigger some failures, but I want you guys to see them so you can get a feel for what happens when you're doing conversions, specifically from, say, for example, a date time or a double to some other static format. And just like before, we're going to do a callback. So we're going to grab that callback and so here, just to emphasize the different types of errors that might come back, I'm going to do this. So obviously this is talking about when a key is not found, meaning the structure that comes back is JSON, but it has a structure similar to a dictionary. So it's looking for certain keys based on the field names, and then when it doesn't see them, it exceptions with this particular exception. So the other one that we're going to be looking for is this. So this is when a certain value type that is expected does not come back. So in other words, it's expecting, where is it? I don't think we have it. But let's say it's expecting a type of date, and instead it gets a date but in a string format, like February 2nd, 1995 or something like that. Then in those cases, it can throw an exception. So let's just label these error. And then we'll just have a generic one, a catch-all one, basically. So we're going to comment this out temporarily. We're going to add our resume. We're going to add the error object, which is basically the error instance itself on any exception. And then I want to go to our actual calling code. Just going to open this up a bit. So if you recall, early on in this project, we had decided to create this screens folder, and we're going to make basically different sections for the application. So now that we've done that, you see how easy it is to find stuff. Because we're going to be working in the comment screen. We have essentially all of the view data inside of a single view model. So now it's pretty easy to find this guy and just jump right in and start refactoring the code. So that's definitely one of the benefits of structuring very early and having a consistent directory pattern. So anyway, so this guy only has one parameter. So I'm going to have to default this to an empty array. And let's check if we get any errors. And we do. because we didn't update this. Let me just go back to the code just so you guys are clear. So we had copied and pasted this initializer, but we didn't set it up. So so we need to set it up. Of course, duh. Okay, we are immediately executing. All right, so that compiles. Okay, so if we attempt to run this, let me show you the output. Let's get rid of this and switch this to a bigger Max Pro. Run it again. Okay. So as you can see, we have a new error. This error is type mismatch. And I actually forgot about this one and didn't put it into our set of catchable statements. But basically what's going on here is for the last modified on field that we have in our comment, it's expecting a double value. Because you'll remember last time when I was explaining some things with date utils, I was mentioning that date is actually a time interval internally, which I believe goes by seconds. So it's basically a double value. But the reason why this throws an error is because in the case of Vapor, it's creating a web API that's supposed to be generic. In other words, any client should be able to receive the data, comprehend it, and do whatever they need to do with it. Now, although we're using Swift to build Vapor, the emitted data, despite these static typings that you see, are ultimately converted into JSON, and then the client has to convert them into their local type, whatever that may be. So as part of doing that and making it very generic, Vapor will convert a date object into a human readable form. So it'll be like 12/01/2020, blah, blah, blah. So that's why this is failing, because it's expecting a number instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some changes to this model. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to convert this into a string so that it can be converted from the JSON into the string representation of the date. But subsequent to that, we're going to create this, real date type. That's basically just a computed property that's just going to get this date, that's a string, and convert it into a real date object. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to update this guy. We'll create a new function, get date from string. So this is going to be nullable because we might not have a string. So this might come in as an empty string. But this guy right here is going to be the default format that we are expecting. So this format means the year in full 4-digit, the month, the day, and then T is just a delimiter. So it's like putting a comma or a pipe in there. And then you have the time itself, including the seconds. And this means this is UTC, because that's how the dates come in from Vapor by default. So then we're going to take the static formatter that we had created initially up here, and we're going to use the built-in function So now we've created this to convert from string to a date. And then we're going to go back to our comment. And we don't need this. So actually we need to update this guy as well, since this is now nullable. I'm going to use a guard to check that it's not null. If it is null, then we'll return an empty string. Okay, so that built. Let's see what happens. All right. So the data comes back, but the data is flat. And the reason for that is because this guy is not being populated, because on the model side, we are returning an entire object due to the way relations work in Fluent ORM. So we're going to match them up by converting this into the same thing, parent comment. Now, if I do that, we're going to get this error. Value type cannot have a stored property that recursively contains it. Now, the reason why this is happening is because this is a struct, in other words, a value type, and this instance references another instance, which potentially could reference another instance, and so on and so forth. The compiler is not allowing that, because for value types, they live basically in tiny memory, either on or very near the CPU. So in the case of structs and value types, they are passed by copy. So every time that if there's an instance of this guy and we set it to something else instead of a pointer referencing it, the original object, it actually makes physical copies of every single time this thing is being set. So if you can imagine having to do that recursively, potentially infinitely, right? Because the parent might have its own parent, which might have its own parent, and so on and so forth. So the Swift compiler doesn't allow this at all. So it's not a big deal. All we have to do is switch this to a class. And now that we have the parent relationship, we can someplace in the code, reference this association and then build out the associated responses when something is a parent of something else, as indicated by this field right here. So before we do that, let's build this out one more time. And we're going to see another set of errors. Okay, now this took me a while to figure out because the message is really not helpful at all. But nevertheless, this is actually pretty important because it reveals some of the internal workings of Vapor. So as you can see here, we have this error message related to decoding, and it's specific to the new field that we just created, parent comment. And it basically says that it was looking for a string, but it found a null value instead, which doesn't make any sense because other than the last modified on field that we just converted into a string, the only other string that I can see here is text, and that's not nullable at all. And in fact, if you go to the model on Vapor itself, you can see that text is not nullable. So then, what's going on here? So what's happening is that in Vapor, the way that you fill in the relationship data, right? So the data that I asked for is comment data, but in unison with this comment data, if I also want the owner, this guy right here, which as indicated by this wrapper, it's a parent, it's a relationship, right, to the users table. And then the parent comment, again, this guy right here, which is also a parent, I have to explicitly list them out right here, right? And only then will the payload come back with these relationships. Now, okay, so what? Well, two issues. As you can see here, the parent, because it's a comment, will have its own owners, right? So if we don't include this, then this will not come back at the parent level. So that's one issue right there. But the other issue, and the bigger one that's really causing this error down here, is that even when there is no parent association, in other words, this particular, let's say you have an array of comments coming back, and it parses one of them, the relationships for one of them, to see if it has any parents, and it doesn't because it is the root parent. Let's say that's the case for one of the instances. It will actually still send back an object, which is sort of weird and unexpected, and potentially there may be a way to disable that, but I was not able to find a way because initially I thought that, well, if I use this closure, perhaps there's a way for me to return it as null, right? Either do something like this with the question mark or some other thing. And I tried a few things and I tried to see if there was any documentation on this topic, but I couldn't find anything. So it looks like this is sort of an edge case that I wouldn't call it necessarily a bug, but it's definitely something that you need to be aware of. and there's no way around it on the client side, and you have to handle it. So the way that we're going to do it is by simply making that optional. But then if we do that, then we have, our prior text that was not expecting optional. So we got to handle those. Now I believe there were some more errors after that, but let's just see what happens here. Yeah. So we just made this optional. So now we got to make this optional, because that's what this guy is complaining about. He's saying that the ID, which is, again, because it's JSON data, right? It's a string. It's going to come back, and a string is the only way to represent one of those long UUIDs, right? ABC 123-246 XYZ. Those kind of numbers, the only way to represent it in JSON is as a string. And we had it as non-nullable, right? Until I just changed it right now. So that's what this error is about, that it got back a null for something that is not nullable, again, on the parent comment, which is empty, but nevertheless an empty skeleton object is sent back, right? So if it wasn't clear, what I was saying before is, even if this parent comment is null, it sends back an empty skeleton of an object, right? And it can, because by default, models in Fluent ORM have the ID as nullable, right? So, where was I? So, I made the update right here. Let's see what happens. All right. So what's this next error? So now we overcame that. So now we got another error, right? So let's see what this error is. Where are we? Coding keys, string value owner, blah, blah, blah. Coding keys, parent comment, debug description. All right. So same deal here. Has to be nullable, because again, if you're bringing back a skeleton from the server, it has the shell, it has the template, but it has no actual data, right? So again, in the case where this is, or this instance is a parent, then obviously it will not have a parent of its own because it is the most root parent. So this is supposed to come back as null, but instead of coming back as completely null, it comes back as an empty skeleton. So I know this is a little bit confusing, but I hope that this clarifies what I'm trying to say. Oops. So obviously if this guy is null, then this won't happen. So we need to put something in there, and that's what I'm doing right here. So we're going to do the same thing over here. Yeah, this was, these issues were pretty unexpected for me too. I'm not sure what the value of doing it in that manner would be, but nevertheless, you know, you're not always going to get a straightforward mechanism in whatever frameworks that you use. So as a software engineer, you just have to deal with it. All right, so again, a new error. So we know that our previous issues, the making of things optional has resolved them. So now we're going to go here, and I just want to make sure. Yeah. So this is the same issue, but we're gonna make this default value, and then we're gonna optional enable it basically. Okay, it's probably because it's being referenced somewhere. Yep. So if it's null, it's going to be 0. If it's null, it's going to be 0. All right. So we're back in business. Obviously, we're getting back the data. We're able to convert it. But clearly, it's not in the correct format because we've lost all of the relationships that we were expecting to see. In other words, the indentations with additional responses to the main comment. So that's pretty easy to take care of. All we have to do is inject or build out the proper associations that we need. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to make a decision of what is the proper place to put such a function, right? So in my opinion, it would be as close to the data as possible. So I'm going to put it here, and I gave it a kind of convoluted name, so I'm just going to look it up. Update comment responses. Whoops. So it takes a bunch of comments and then it returns a bunch of comments. So this is going to be the comments that it will return once it's done. So we're going to list through all the comments, and for each iteration we're going to find the related, let's call them response comments, meaning the responses of this guy, right? So more explicitly, all the comments that have the parent comment object as being this current iteration comment. So what that looks like is we do a filter on the whole entire comments array, and then we say parent. So if this iteration has a parent comment, right? It's non-nil. Then I compare it to the current comment that I'm looping on higher up, and I see, do they have the same ID? So then if they do have the same ID, then that means that this guy, this guy is this guy's parent, right? If they don't, then I say no, and it won't, and this particular item will not be included in this result set. So then I fill out the responses, and then I take that guy and only that guy, right? And I append him to this new list of comments, and then I return the new list of comments. Okay? I hope that's clear. So now I'm going to take this and then I'm going to format it before it gets sent back to the callback. And then the callback is going to consume it, the formatted one, and then it's going to set it to all comments. So here, forgot to put it back onto the main thread. So we'll just do that real quick. Just going to compile this so that compilation happened. Bam. Love it. As you can see, the relationships are now there. Everything is lined up properly. And everything is displaying correctly. Awesome. So that was it. And in the next video, we are going to do the writing portions of this screen. So we're going to reply, have this pop open with the keyboard, type in the response, save it to the database, and we're going to allow liking each of these comments. And that's what we're going to do in the next video. So thanks for watching, guys. If this video was valuable to you, you liked the video, please like the video, share the video, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much.